You see, issue of sample. What I believe is that before you collect sample, you must have examine where the production is going to take place, which you will render kind of analysis. Do away with this, do away with that, before now it's ready for you to now give a go ahead to take samples. So in that regard, again, I would like you to tell us what quantity of sample do you think or you are recommending to collect? Because sometimes the estimates and when you post multiple, it's really worth comparing. So I want you to be on specific that the samples usually come after your inspections and given the budget to go ahead and bring the samples. And again, the quantity that needed to be issued or submitted to your office as well.
Okay, thank you very much. On the issue of quantity that you need to submit, to be candid with you, it all depends on the sample and the track record of the sample. For like Europe, let me take an example. And if you wondering why, I can give you a lot, but not that what we do in our laboratory. I was in WenA for 5 good years before I was moved to Kaduna Lab, before coming down to the headquarters. And I've mentioned in my discussion that we have sections of the laboratory. I'll mention here. We have here the various chemical analysis. We have various microbiological analysis, that is microbiology. We have food gradation lab to determine the alpha and beta emission model. I took them on the sample reading. We have pesticide residues lab. Now I've mentioned all that. Pesticide residues lab will determine the pesticide, the remnant that is in that product. And apart from that, we have mycotoxin lab. These are major issues that is affecting maintenance products when they are exported to the developed countries. Now, if you are bringing your sample, for God's sake, you don't give one bottle of glucose like this. Remember, glucose is something that cannot withstand heat. So, if you are bringing one sample of glucose and 4, 5, 6 labs want to carry out analysis of that product, you agree with me that doesn't go well. So, it is expected of you to bring, if that product is in maybe part of 12 or part of 6, it's okay for the analysis. The agency does not want your product. But considering that at the end of the certification, when after the analysis,
So I was previously in that division with the Youth Development Division, supporting the communication, advocacy, and partnership part of their work. So basically, that's a bit of a background on what I do and some of the things I've been involved in. I just came out of a webinar a few minutes ago, and we were speaking on facilitating trade for women and youth, which falls in the line of what the AFCFT Secretariat was tasked to do to develop a protocol on trade for women and youth. So we just came out of that webinar. And as you all know, today is Africa Integration Day. So a lot of activities are happening to commemorate Africa Integration Day. So today's program, falls within that framework. And I believe strongly that e-commerce is very, very important um, to enable that level of integration within the continent. So I can see that our panelists are here. I see Mr. Yemi Bello. I see Miss Aisha. I see Mr. Soji Adeniyi, and I believe that they would be supporting this conversation. So first of all, let me humbly give the floor to Mr. Yemi Bello to give us, according to his perspective, tell us, I know he is much more from the older generation, and I believe that he has seen the rise of e-commerce from the time that it became a thing in Africa. We know some of these popular e-commerce platforms. We know the Jumias, we know the GGs, and some of these other platforms. And these were innovations that came not too long ago. But even before then, there were some other innovations to facilitate trade, especially within the e-commerce structure that was made. And I'm sure that he would have some ideas and some insights to give on that. So Mr. Yemi, I humbly give the floor to you. Hello? Kindly confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I don't know if Mr. Yemi can hear us. Okay. So, okay, I don't know if Halimat Kadiri can hear me. Or Mr. Yemi, can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so maybe since Mr. Yemi is back, let me kindly give the floor to him, and then from there I'll move to you, Ms. Halimat.
Good afternoon, Daniel. Thank you for Good afternoon, Daniel. Thank you for having me on the call to join the panel this afternoon, and then thank you for moderation. I think you were asking about my perspective of the role e-commerce plays in trade. I think it's a fascinating question, and I think it's a very important one. The way technology has changed over the last 2 decades has been immense. I mean, from the period when trade was, I guess it started off with cash or trade by barter. Then you could talk about using cash transactions, then also moving all the way up to using card transactions, and now a lot of transactions are now undertaken digitally. So there has been, and I think what's also important is not just the different types of transactions that have taken place, but also, more importantly, the speed of the transactions. So previously, when you were trying to perform a transaction that would take from a barter transaction that would take a number of days to weeks, to now moving to doing real-time transactions, which could actually take milliseconds. So we can see that the role technology plays in e-commerce is immense, or in trade is immense. So I think what is important for Africa and for African businesses is how can they actually harness these technologies, jump on the bandwagon so that they are not actually left behind. So as an introduction, that would just be my first take, that technology has come a long way from barter transactions to now real-time transactions, and so many platforms that are out there, and the speed with which these transactions are being conducted. So it's important that any of these businesses now start to take advantages of these opportunities and leverage them so that they're not actually left behind. That would be my introduction.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Yemi. Thank you so much. I like your point around streamlining, especially in the area around payment. We have, if my memory serves me right, we have more than 20 currencies, and sometimes it's a problem, using some of these e-commerce platforms, which have not been properly streamlined to integrate all these currencies. So these are some of the issues that we are currently facing. So a lot of times, many of these e-commerce platforms, cannot move beyond a certain scope or a certain barrier because of some of these barriers that are affecting. So thank you very much for raising that very important point. At this point, I want to move to Ms. Halimat, so she can add a voice to this. Yes, Ms. Halimat.
Hello.
Yeah.
So sorry, I have network issue here. Please, can you please help me to summarize what you said and what exactly you want me to respond to?
So thank you very much. So we're speaking on the on e-commerce, and Yemi spoke a bit about some of the barriers to e-commerce and why it's important for us to streamline a lot of activities that would help promote the effectiveness of e-commerce platforms. So basically, just wanted to hear from you, give a little introduction on what your perspective is on the current status of e-commerce in Africa, and how we can better streamline it to other demographics and in a much bigger trajectory to the
Hello,
continent.
Daniel.
Yeah, Mr. Soji. Yes, please.
Just a point about to help you guys what the objective of this session. The session is to actually have, as a practitioner, one who has been an artist, to give us what in the sub-region and that space is by entrepreneurs. And then we just want to ask you questions and what can be done better. Do you understand? So it's not moderating this, actually like a keynote is giving us based on responsibility in the region. Tell us what is going on.
Hello. I think we missed him. Hello, Mr. Soji. Yeah, we missed you, Mr. Soji. We couldn't hear you.
A moment. I thought me. So speak to the content from your presentation, specific questions, so that the people who are on us can engage technology, need to embrace, can see how technological can also use opportunity. I hope you got me now.
Yes.
Thank you.
I got you
you
now.
Thank you.
I got you now. So yeah, I think I missed some information earlier, and I've gotten clarity now. So thank you very much. So
thank you.
I think I am rather supposed to give some insight, and then we discuss around these areas. So I think I've gotten it right now. Thank you very much for that clarity. So looking at the AFCFTA agreement, which I believe some or most of us have an idea on, one of the things one of the things that the AFCFTA agreement seeks to achieve is to streamline a lot of activities, remove tariffs, ensure that some unfair trade practices are mitigated. Areas around dumping, some other trade barriers that we normally face in our various trading prospects. And one of the ways to mitigate some of these barriers is through leveraging technology. Within the agreement, within the structure of the agreement, we have the trade in goods and competition, protocol on trade in goods and competition, and then we have the protocol on trade in services, e-commerce, and intellectual property rights. So within these various protocols, structures will be put in place to ensure that trading is streamlined. As I mentioned earlier in my submission, currently one of the areas we are facing in the digital structure is in the area of payments. We have more than 20 currencies, and there's currently no platform that can absorb all these all these currencies. And one of the ways the AFCFTA Secretariat seeks to mitigate this is through the introduction of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, in collaboration with the Afrexim Bank. This platform seeks to streamline all the currencies. Some of these challenges that we are facing, in trade, especially within the e-commerce sector, because most of these areas, most of these platforms, are limited to a certain demographic. For example, Jumia is, we have Jumia in a number of countries, but we don't have a regional Jumia platform. We don't have a platform that serves, we don't have a Jumia platform that serves the West African region. We don't have a Jumia platform that serves the East African region. We don't have a Jumia platform that serves the North African region. So it's, separated into the country demographics. And this is because of this payments issue that we have. And this is one of the areas that the AFCFTA seeks to alleviate by implementing this Pan-African payment and settlement system. So I don't know if maybe there are any more submissions or any questions I might need to bring up.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think you gave us an insight into what could cause the reason why we are not probably having more Jumias and more Gigis and more Kongas in the region because of these monetary exchange challenges. Mr. Moderate, I mean, Mr. Mr. Montaz, can you hear me? Mr. Montaz, can you hear me?
I'm with you, Mr. Soji.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, is it okay if we continue this way?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So in my view, please allow me to share video if possible. In my view, I think, thank you. In my view, I think there are two issues that are particularly challenging. The costs of technology release for that space is more difficult for SMEs to just aspire to go into that level. I think what is going on now is that we have the likes of Jumia, the likes of Gigi, the likes of Konga that are already there, and they are an e-commerce platform. So all that the current SME, medium, micro needs to do, especially the very small ones, is simply to get onto those platforms and register and be able to offer their services and trade. And after begins to kick in when it comes to delivery into multiple locations, delivery across country, delivery across continents. And for Jumia, for instance, just like you said, they have a platform that the billing is in the local currency in Nigeria, not in US dollar, not in any dollar, not in a denomination, available across the West Africa monetary future. So that kind of limits what's good. So anyone who is buying at Naira exchange rate to the country's currency. And that becomes a problem, when transactions are across countries.
Hello. It seems we have lost Mr. Soji. Montaz? Yeah, kindly confirm. Yeah, it looks like we have lost Mr. Soji.
I think Mr. Soji is experiencing some technical glitches, but you can go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. So, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, one thing we have to look at, I'm really looking at the issue of currency because it costs a lot of currency. It costs a lot of money for even currency convertibility. So each year, Africa spends more than $5 billion for currency convertibility. Which means that, e-commerce platforms, a lot of them do not have that capacity to manage some of these issues. For example, if you look at e-commerce platforms like Alibaba, look at platforms like Walmart, and the Amazons, you notice that these people have the capacity to be able to absorb some of these, some of these costs of operation. So they can, streamline their activities in a certain manner. But within Africa, I think we have only a few multi-million dollar e-commerce platforms. I know Jumia is one. I know Gigi is slowly getting there. And I know the other platforms that are upcoming as well. So, I mean, this PAP system, this Pan-African payment and settlement system, is very, very vital. And some of these new and upcoming e-commerce platforms can leverage on this system to be able to streamline payments and ensure that they are able to gain much more, let me put it this way, capital than they used to gain, because some of these barriers that are affecting their operations would be removed by the implementation of this PAP system. So, I mean, from the data point of view, $5 billion spent each year just for currency convertibility alone. So it's a huge challenge, especially looking at our current climate, where 70% of women and youth contribute to the continent's overall GDP, which means that we have so many startups spread across the continent and small-scale industries. So it's very, very important that we look at that particular area. And I like the fact that Mr. Soji spoke about, and he mentioned about, scaling up SMEs and ensuring that these people are, well informed, number one, and they are also built. And now we have incubators, we have accelerators, which help to ensure that some of these things are done. So I think it's very, very important that these areas are looked into. Thank you very much. Over to you, Montas, or to Mr. Soji, so he can continue his presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Montas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel, all the way from Ghana on e-commerce as a trade facilitator. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your diligence and your attention to details. Mr. Soji, I'd like to invite you for some remarks.
Thank you very much, Montes. And thanks to the entire team out there together. I think Mr. Haye has said it all. We will not get there until PAPs come on board fully, where we can have a payment system that the region can key into and reduce the currency conversion that make a lot of buyers as well as traders have less confidence in the system, because if they lose money during conversion, then what's the point? Sometimes their margin is so small, they are hoping to make do with volume in order to actually stay in business. But when they lose that small margin to currency conversion, it's a big problem. The other thing that technology could help is in the logistics of tracking delivery, the logistics of ensuring that across country, across borders, that other companies and service industry that needs to come up, that's still not there now. Even the provisions in AFTA has not yet defined the role of logistics companies and how it will be easy for an African logistics company to emerge from the likes of the big ones like DHL and the rest of them, who are currently taking advantage of having succeeded in the West and coming down to us. We need to build an ecosystem that deals with the logistics of picking up from Nigeria, delivering to Ghana, delivering to Cote d'Ivoire, delivering across Eastern, Central Africa, and maybe down all the way to the South, without necessarily being, going first to Germany before coming back to Africa, because that's the modus operandi of the current, logistics companies that we have. Same thing with trucking companies. How do we ensure that we can hand over to a trucking company in Lagos and expect that the goods arrived completely trucked all the way to Cote d'Ivoire, all the way to Senegal, or down south to Namibia and South Africa without necessarily panicking as to what would have happened en route? Those were the things that the EU perfected over the years. And I'm glad to note that most of the provisions in the AFTA were actually lifted from the EU. And our goal is to ensure that in Africa, we have an Africa Union that truly becomes a made in Africa Union, rather than made in Nigeria, made in Ghana, made in Cote d'Ivoire. Just like now you see a product and it simply says made in the European Union. So until we get there, the things that we need to do, the things that we need to understand as our major driver is to encourage our tech guys who are already in the trenches to look at how they can become like the Kobo of Africa, other than Kobo Nigeria that we have now for logistics and trucking. How we can, partner across the various countries using technology. I mean, just like now, Daniel is sitting in his office in Accra. I am, sitting somewhere in Abuja, and anyone could have been anywhere. And all of us are having this conversation. The same way technology has made it so easy that we can track. We are talking about artificial intelligence. In the future, we'll have, well, not in the future, we already have driverless trucks that are going, to come and take those goods across, Africa without, anyone driving them, because, technology will take control. The customs will be able to scan, with the trucks driving through and see that, these are legitimate transactions that are moving across, borderless Africa. And it looks funny for now because our generation, my generation in particular, have not gone through that kind of technology exposure. So it might look strange to my mother, who would see trade only when you give her cash in her hand, compared to me that would finish all my transaction online on my phone, and I would just expect delivery. So technology needs to deal with SMEs in Africa based on how much we embrace it, based on how much we understand it. Then we need the systems like the PAPs, we need the system like the Monetary Union, we need the systems that cuts across the backbone that would encourage people to key in. Because if I cannot get my business going just because I am worried about whether the guy in Ghana or the guy in Senegal, is genuine or not genuine, whether he's going to pay me or cheat me, then we will not move, forward. But if we have a system that checks and balances all of this, if we have a dispute resolution system, which is provided for in AFTA, if we have a trade dispute management body, which is provided for again in the AFTA, if we could, immediately implement some of this. I mean, we only have about 33 countries that have ratified and deposited the instruments for AFTA, so we still have about 20 more. But even within the 30, we are good to go if we know what is going on. So that would be my contribution now.
And Montaz, if you allow me,
go ahead, Mr. Daniel, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. One thing I wanted to add, maybe my final remarks, also, respecting the time, is that, Africa's contribution to to trade, global trade, is less than 3%. I did some research and I realized that the treaty, the Lagos, the Abuja Treaty, that brought about the regional economic communities, the ECOWASs, the EACs, and all these other communities. The goal of that was to, ensure that, Africa's contribution through these regional blocks to global trade was about 3%. That was in 1990, if my memory serves me right. That was when this treaty was signed. More than 20, we are in 2021, so more than 30 years down the line, Africa's contribution to global trade is still less than 3%. Singapore's contribution to global trade is at 6%. That is just Singapore alone. Singapore's contribution to global trade is at 6%. Intra-Africa trade currently is less than 18%. So trading within Africa, that has improved from the time that treaty was signed to establish the RECs. It improved from about 8 to 10% to about 18%. So that's a significant improvement. But Africa's contribution to global trade is less than 3%. Why is that happening? Because we are not processing our raw materials into finished products. Not to digress away from the topic, but why am I saying this? I'm saying this because looking at where we are now and looking at where the world is going now, if you notice currently the trajectory of things that is going on, a lot of the developed countries, let me put it this way, are now moving away from industrialization and moving into intellectual property. They are looking into patents, and these are the areas they are slowly moving into. They are slowly moving away from industrialization and moving into patents. But Africa is now building its industrial ground, industrial phase. We are still building that phase, so we cannot compare ourselves to some of the developed countries. But it's very, very important that we take a critical look at e-commerce, which can also be a very important weapon that we can use to boost intra-Africa trade. Currently, internet connectivity in Africa is at 40%. And within that 40%, less than 20% of people have access to stable internet. I don't know the statistics for Nigeria, but if the population in the over 200 million population of people, if maybe about 60% have access, have wide internet, have internet coverage, probably about 15 to 20% of them would have stable internet. And with this e-commerce system, we need the internet to be able to ensure that trading within these platforms are streamlined and they are done with little or no hassle. So these are some of the areas that we have to look at before building a structure. You start off from the foundation, and I'm really happy that Mr. Soji spoke about some areas that would help build up the foundation. Mr. Yemi also spoke about these areas, and also I gave a little insight on the area around money, currency, and some of the things that it causes to the trade scope in the continent. So I think it's very, very important that we look at e-commerce and we engage with our government and tell them that they must fast track laws that protect people that are in e-commerce, and also provide funding for them, provide structures that will help fund some of these e-commerce structures for them to scale up and be able to compete, especially also looking at the introduction of the AFCFTA agreement. Thank you very much. Over to you, Montas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel Aye, all the way from Ghana, on e-commerce as a trade facilitator. Thank you so much for your time, for your diligence. If you're just joining us, well, I'd like to welcome you to the final day of the Women Enterprise Alliance Conference, themed SME Scalability in Intra-Regional Trade. So we've had sessions on export transactions, procedures, and documentation, supporting SMEs with standards, the role of NAFDAC in enhancing international trade, and e-commerce as a trade facilitator. We'll be having our final session shortly, but before then, I'd like to invite Mr. Soji Adeni for a recap of everything we've discussed today. This is just so those joining us are carried along. And after that, we'll be having our final session. Please take a listen. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone watching us online from across the world. And those of you in Africa, congratulations for being part of this conference. This conference started yesterday with a physical session where we had the Honorable Minister of Trade and Industry, Otumba Adeni Adebayo, who was the yesterday and gave us insights into what the government is doing to ensure that we have opportunities as SMEs, as small and medium businesses, to export and hand foreign exchange. And we went through several other panels yesterday. First panel looking at new voices in Africa and how trade is changing, how the game is changing. Younger people are going into agriculture, into technology, and they're telling their stories. And we had another session on investment opportunities in export and the export barriers to trade. Then we had a session that focused on the key enablers in the industry, the standards organization, the Food and Drug, NAFDAC, the customs, and all the other gatekeepers in that space. Then, of course, we had a final session that looked at the legal challenges, the legal implications for trade within Africa using the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement as the yardstick. That was yesterday. Today, we started, early enough with the export conditions and processes that are necessary for exports. I mean, that was the export transaction, the processes and the documentation required. And we had information that the Export Promotion, Nigeria Export Promotion Council is ready with a one-stop shop that clearly define the roles of exporters in that space, how much transaction you need, how much documentation you need to do, what are the processes you need to engage in, and people were able to ask questions as to why some of those line areas are not yet streamlined. And then, of course, we have the Standard Organization of Nigeria coming in to tell us about supporting SMEs with standards and why standards are important. The ISO certification requirements, the export requirement for other countries needing to receive goods and services from Africa and from Nigeria and the sub-region. And these were well debated, and issues that came up there was how to ensure that we further streamline even the currently streamlined system, such that more and more people are encouraged to look at why they must be engaged with the Standard Organization of Nigeria to ensure that their goods meet the required international practice, the good manufacturing practice requirements across the nations that are going to be importing the goods and services from Nigeria. And then we had a very extensive discussion with the NAFDAC, that's the National Food and Drug Administration and Control in Nigeria, who took us step by step to how to register a product, how to ensure that your manufacturing facility meets good manufacturing process, how to write your standard operating procedures so that there's consistency in your production processes, and how to ensure that your product passes NAFDAC regulatory processes with minimum challenges. And they also encouraged us that we should walk straight into their offices nationwide without necessarily using consultants, that they are not in support of just going in and getting ripped off by consultants when you can actually pay less and use the facilities within the NAFDAC provisions as a government regulatory agency. And then we went on to talk about e-commerce as an enabler of trade in the sub-region. This was an expose into how the opportunities still exist for growth in this space. The big players are there, but then each and every one of us can either key into the existing channels or create competitive channels, because there's sufficient people. 1.3 billion people in Africa cannot be served with 2 or 3 platforms. There needs to be more people, more tech-savvy people who should understand how to introduce game changers in that field. And we also did talk about using technology for logistics, for service delivery, for monitoring and tracking across the continent, and vision in the after, especially as relates to intellectual property, as relates to trade disputes, as relates to logistics, air transport, road transport, networks, and all of that are taken into consideration, and that there are huge opportunities, spaces for young people to connect, because we have what it takes to support Africa, because we're still quite low. And of course, that Africa's contribution, global 1.3 billion, is still less than 5%. Global trade. So the opportunities are there, especially for small, medium, and micro enterprises to be the game changer in seeing the new face of Africa. Thank you for joining us, and I hope that I've been able to give a short overview of the conference so far. Thank you, Montes, for asking of me.
Oh, thank you so much, apt and substance. At this point, the next session will be on NGO management by Mr. Shim Ayegba, Chief Executive Officer, Better Life Program for African Women. But before that, I'd ask that we take some few minutes for another tea break before we convene and get into our final session. We'll be dismissing for tea break right now, 15 minutes, and I'll be back for the final session. So on this note, I'd like us to dismiss for 15 minutes. Thank you.
why you should be looking for people to invest in your business to start. That doesn't show seriousness. Your business must have started, no matter how small, and you must have a certain degree of records for you to be able to say, whoever you're talking to, that this business is up and
in enhancing international trade, and e-commerce as a trade facilitator. My name is Montaz Abubakar, and it's been a joy being your host. We're transitioning into our final session, by the way, NGO management by Mr. Shin Ayeba. So, NGO management, Mr. Shin Ayeba. So I yield the floor to you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Montaz, for the brief introduction. And thank you to the WenA team for having me here today to give the final session on NGO management. And this session will be included the better life for the African and the world. So I'll share my screen. Okay, just to ensure. Okay. So we're looking at, as he said, we're going to be looking at the concept of this concept together. My name is Shem Ayeba. I'm currently the Chief Operations Officer for the Better Life program for the African that will be doing in collaboration with the WenA, that's the WenA Enterprise Network Alliance. So to get right into it, I would start with a favorite quote of mine by Alvin Toffler, which says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but learn and learn." And why is this important as we go into this session? Because I know we're going to have a diversified group of people that are going to be attending this session today. We're going to take it from the basic to a bit of the complex. And as a result of that, I will implore you to have an open mind for those who are already advanced with the NGO industry. Please bear with us so we can also carry everybody along. But as we go through, it's important that you are open to learning new things. You are also open on learning certain behaviors and traits that might not be the best for the kind of work we do. And then also relearning new things or relearning things that we had forgotten, things like creativity. Growing up as a child, I'm sure a lot of us had strong passion for wanting to change the world. But as we grow into adulthood and adult life, a lot of those things seem to have given way. So a bit of this session will also be a challenge for all of us to be able to pick up those traits that would have left as we were growing up. So that's why this quote for me is very powerful. So with that said, we're going to be looking at a couple of concepts. So we have 1 hour to go through the workshop on NGO management. So as much as possible, I'll try to be concise. We might not be able to exhaust all of the concepts here. And so that's why, as a result of that, after this session, we're going to be open to having further collaborations, even offline. So we're going to take it from the introduction, where we're going to look at when NGO, the concept of NGO came into mainstream. We're going to look at the types of NGO, and then we're going to also look at the NGO environment. Is it the internal environment, the external environment? And then also taking it further, we're also going to look at the challenges that a lot of NGOs are facing and how we can solve some of those challenges. And then we'll go on to strategic management of NGOs. Every organization will require a strategy for us, for the company to be able to excel. And with that, we're also going to go into an interesting bit of it, which is the concept of NGO project management. A lot of NGOs now are organizing their activities in the sense that it's a project, and we're going to look at how best to do that. And finally, we'll close out with fundraising. So it promises to be an interesting session. So stay with me. And please take advantage of the Q&A session. You can just type your questions in the chat box. The ones I can respond to immediately, I will. But those I can't, then would leave it till the end of the session. So before I go into the content, it's important that I give a brief introduction of what the Better Life program for the African rural woman is all about. As I said, this session is in collaboration with the Better Life. A lot has been said about WenA since yesterday, so it's important also that we know a bit of Better Life. So the Better Life program for the African rural woman is a non-profit organization that was founded in 1987 with a vision to see the emergence of a well-informed, economically and socio-politically empowered African woman who is participating actively in the process of national development and the promotion of family values. Our core mandates are adult literacy programs, empowerment and support initiatives. And the organization is currently chaired by Her Excellency Haja Aisha Pangida, whose role is to enhance its vision, its mission and vision. The program has recorded outstanding impact under her leadership. And I also want to use this opportunity to thank the leadership of the Better Life program for the opportunity to also be speaking here today. So as an introduction, let's go into when the concept of NGO really started. So the term non-governmental organization was created in Article 71 of the Charter of the newly formed United Nations in 1945. So you can see that NGOs have actually been existing. And not for profit. I know a lot of hybrid form of NGOs are coming into mainstream, like social enterprises where some form of profits are made, but it has to do it. It has to go back into the running of the organization. But we're going to on pure NGO. They're estimated to be about 10 million NGOs. So you can see that more NGOs are being created every day. And that's why it's important also to know if there's a need to even start a new NGO, if maybe you're better off working for an NGO, or what are the collaborations that actually exist in the industry. And that's why a session of this magnitude is important for all of us. Not always will NGOs be involved in working with the downtrodden or underprivileged. There seems to be this misconception in the industry where a lot of people that want to start new NGOs have a focus of the downtrodden and underprivileged. Why this is important? It is also important to take note of the fact that there are different types of NGOs, and that's what we're going to be looking at today, the types of NGOs that we can start. And if you already have started at the NGO, then we're going to be looking at the hybrid, how you can also be able to collaborate with already existing NGOs currently in the sector. NGOs some are very highly trained and offering specialized services. Some may be working on more professional services, providing health, educational services, economic upliftment through small loans and other entrepreneurial services. So you can see that the scope is actually far-reaching. So let's go into definitions because it also guides us as to what we're really talking about. So there are two definitions we're going to be looking at, the one from the World Bank and that also from the United Nations. As I said, the word NGO came into mainstream because of the article from the United Nations. So it's important that we go to the source meaning of and the definition of what an NGO is. Let's start with the World Bank. The World Bank defines NGOs as a private organization that pursues activities to relieve suffering, promote the interest of the poor, protect the environment, provide basic social services, or undertake community development. So when I write you with this definition, you have in mind what the scope of your NGO can be. And then going further, the United Nations defined an NGO as a non-governmental organization. A non-governmental organization is any non-profit voluntary citizens group which is organized on a local, national, or international level. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate with this. So we have NGOs playing in the local space at the grassroots level, and some of them who have graduated to the national level, and then we also have currently have international NGOs that cuts across different borders and countries. And these organizations have to be task-oriented and driven with people with a common interest. And this really relates to any other kind of organization. If you're going to start any organization, it's important that the people who are starting such an organization have a common one interest. So this really ties a lot with starting actually. So as I mentioned, there are different types of NGOs that we've seen in this space. But just to categorize them, there are basically 4 types of NGOs that you're going to find. The charitable, the ones with the charitable orientation. These are mostly NGOs that come into communities with little participation from the communities. So this could be like relief services. This could be NGOs that come into a place and provide healthcare without a lot of input. So it's just a form of charity that those organizations are given. And then moving on from that, you have the service-oriented NGOs where they come in, they provide educational services, legal services, health services to the community at almost no cost. And so those are the service-oriented types of NGOs. And then if you take it further to the participatory NGOs, these are the ones that come into the community and they take input from the community before they. And we've seen a lot of this. Part of what we also do in the BLP, we as much as our programs cuts across a lot of the different types of orientation, but we also believe in participatory form of NGO where the local communities are actively involved in the solutions that we are creating for them. And then also the final one is the one that has to do with empowering, has the empowering orientation. So these are those that are involved in training and capacity building. And as I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all. You can have an NGO that actually cuts across the different orientations in terms of how it is structured. And then based on that, we also saw from the definition of the United Nations that NGOs can play at the local level, community-based NGOs. These are NGOs that function at the grassroots level, and then taking it up to the city-wide organizations. These are more, the spread for this ones are beyond the community-based NGOs. The spread is more far-reaching. And after that, you have those that have gone beyond the city-wide to the national NGOs. These are NGOs that are functioning at the national level. And finally, we have those that are playing at the international scene. And it's possible for your NGO to actually graduate. So you can start from a community-based organization based on the resources and that you have at your disposal, and you slowly grow up to becoming an international NGO. But then it still has to do with asking the question why are you in this space in the first place? And these are some of the things we're also going to be looking at as to even starting an NGO. So with that in mind, as I rightly said, when you want to start an NGO, there are important questions that should be answered. And this also goes for really starting any business. And one of the questions that you would have to answer would be, am I cut out for this? This question is pretty much asking the why, because most times your why is going to determine what keeps you going as you run your organization. And most times you would find people who cannot answer this question. And the fact that you've seen a lot of issues in society does not necessarily mean that you're cut out to start an NGO. It doesn't mean that you have the right skills or you have the right resources to actually start an NGO. But this is an important question that you have to answer. Do you have the time? Can you pool the resources? Do you have the passion it takes for you to actually, because as you would find with any journey you embark on as regards an organization, there are times where it's going to be very tough. And at those moments, those are the times where your why, as to why you started the NGO in the first place, is what is going to keep you going. And that's why these questions, as simple as they may seem, it's very important when you're about to embark on the journey of starting an NGO. And I'm sure some of our participants here who are already involved in this industry will be able to relate with this. And do you have an original idea? We know that ideas actually rule the world. And if you have an original idea, it is easier for you to create a niche for yourself. But if you're going to come into a space where there are already a lot of players, then you're going to go to the next question. Is a non-profit necessary at this point? If you're going to come into a space where a lot of people are already playing, you might start looking at maybe creating collaborations or being a bridge between stakeholders in that industry, irrespective of what your passion may be, rather than you starting your own NGO. And that's why having an original ideas, you would also find in any other business. If you want to go into any other business, one of the important questions that investors, that partners are looking at is what is unique about your idea. And that's the same thing with an NGO. Before donors would give out funds, they want to know what problem are you solving in the community. And there are times when they're actually going to tell you, the donors themselves would ask you if you've heard of a similar organization that is doing what you're about to start. In that moment, it's the way you answer that question will determine if you have an original idea or it's a concept that has not been crystallized yet in the minds of the person that is about to start. And that will take us to the final question, which is it even necessary for you to start? As I said, if you don't have an original idea, if it's something you're passionate about that other people are doing, then you might want to be in that organization and help the organization grow rather than starting your own NGO from the start. So these 3 questions, as I said, they are very simple, but they will go a long way to keep you going as you run your organization. So talking about that, so looked at the definition, looked at the types of NGO, looked at questions that you should ask yourself when you want to start. Now let's look at the environment that an NGO would play in. So there are 2 types of environment, similarly with any other organization. You're going to find the external environment and the internal environment. And the interplay of how your organization is going to work would have to do with the interplay between the external and the internal environment. And as you can see from the diagram, there has to be a relationship between your organization, the activities that it's going to create, and then also the relationships that it will form. And that in itself will now give you a context as to how you would run your organization. But the context of how you run your organization is largely going to be dependent on your external and your internal environment. And so talking about the internal and the external environment, it is important for us to be able to break it down so you understand what are the components that makes the external environment and the components that makes the internal environment. And there's a popular framework, which is the PESTLE framework for analyzing external environments. And under the PESTLE framework, you have the political environment, the economic environment, the social, the technological, the environmental, and then you have the legal forces. And most of them, the thing with the external environment is that you might not be able to change much in the external environment. These are things that are going to act on your organization that are most largely outside your control. In some cases, you might be able to influence them, but in most cases, they're going to act on your organization and you have little control over them. And so just to give us an idea of the components that make up, for example, the political environment, some of us are already conversant with this concept, but it's important for us to be able to refresh our minds as to what makes up the political environment. So government stability, political values and beliefs, shaping policies. So for example, if you're playing in a particular country and you want to go to another country to set up your NGO, you have to be able to understand the government stability in that country. What are the values, what are the belief systems, what are the policies, are there policies? The fact that you started an NGO in Nigeria doesn't mean that your NGO is going to work in India. The fact that you started an NGO in Nigeria doesn't mean that it's going to work in Ghana. It doesn't mean that it's going to work in Cameroon. So it's important that you understand the political forces that are at play in the particular jurisdiction that you're about to start your NGO. And then regulations towards trade and global business, taxation policies, priorities in social sectors. So these are things that you might not necessarily have control over, but in some cases you might be able to influence. And then also the economic factors, so GDP trends, interest and savings rates, money supply, inflation rates, trade deficit, business cycles, disposable income, unemployment. These are concepts that as you go into the NGO industry, you should be able to know what the economic atmosphere is. If disposable income is not available, then you might have to start looking at sourcing for funds for running your NGO outside that particular environment. And that's why it's important for you to be able to have these indices in mind as you run your NGO. And then also socio-cultural factors, the population demographics, what's the life expectancy, what's the age distribution of the particular demographics that you're going to be working with. This would also help you for you to be able to know there are NGOs, for example, that are designed for the elderly. So if you're going to, for example, come up with an NGO that is structured for the elderly, you look at the Nigerian space. Is it the right environment or the particular community you find yourself in? Is it the right space? For example, in Nigeria, we have a large population of young people that for example, are unemployed. You want to look at that rather than creating an NGO, for example, that would be for the elderly. It depends on the particular jurisdictions you found yourself. For example, I worked in Hong Kong for a bit, and a lot of NGOs were coming up that were focused on the elderly, how to cater for the elderly, because they have this huge explosion in terms of the elderly. Life expectancy in Hong Kong is between, for women is about 67 and for men is about 84. And when you look at that, the average already is giving you 87 years. So it means that there's a lot of elderly people in the community, and NGOs that are coming up were created to cater for that community. So understanding population demographics can actually give you an understanding of what your NGO is structured for and what it should be doing. And then the social mobility, do you have a lot of rural-urban migration? And do you want to start an NGO that is going to be able to cater for that? Lifestyle changes, attitude to work and leisure, multiple income families, health and fitness awareness, education spread. All of these are things that are under the social factors that are going to be at play in the external environment that will be able to influence the way your organization is set up. And that's why this concepts are very important. And then also the technological advancement. We've seen how technology has disrupted a lot of industries. Technology also is disrupting the NGO world. And so if you're going to be coming in, there are certain things that you would have to take cognizance of. If you're already playing in this industry, you would have to take note of the fact that technological trends, if you don't adapt to it, if you don't adjust to them, they will be able to, at some point, you might become obsolete. And that's why, as much, even as for an existing business or for an existing NGO, it's important that you take note of the trends in all of the external environments for you to be able to, you might not be able to influence it, but then it would influence the internal environment that you have control over for you to be able to shape your organization to not be left out as advancements are taking place in this industry. So under technological, you can have biotechnology, process innovation, digital revolution, government spending on research. So if the government is spending heavily on research and development in the technological industry, it means that things are going to change very fast. So you want to be able to know where the funds are going into and how you better prepare yourselves for it. So because of the amount of information we have to cover, we would have to move at a bit faster pace. And also the legal forces, as I said, so monopolies, are there monopolies in the industry? How do you, working in that kind of a jurisdiction, how are you able to adjust and play in that space? Normally, when you're coming up to set up an organization in a monopolistic system, it becomes very difficult because it means that the stakeholders that you're going to be dealing with are quite few, and it means that your options are limited. So how are you going to be able to structure an organization to still be impactful in such an environment? It's important that you even know what you're up against before you come into a particular area, before you even start an organization there. What are the employment laws? What are the health and safety regulations? What are the laws behind product safety? We heard from conversations yesterday how, for example, you might have a certification in a part of Africa, but it doesn't mean that it's a blanket certification. So as you go into a new country, you might need to get a new certification, and that's part of what we're talking about as it relates to intra-trade. How are we going to be able to remove these borders so that it's easier? But if you don't know this, you are just going to go with the mindset that your product has been tested to be safe in a particular jurisdiction. You're taking it to the next one, and you'll be shocked at what you're going to find. So it's important that you know the legal environment that you're going to be playing in. So these are some of the forces that are going to be acting on your organization that are external. As I mentioned, external forces are those forces that you don't necessarily have direct control over. You might be able to influence them, but you don't have direct control over them. And then that would lead us to the internal environment. The difference between the internal environment and the external environment is that the internal environment are the ones that you have control over. These are the traits that your organization is going to be going through that you can control. And a simple way to analyze your internal environment is using the SWOT analysis. A lot of businesses use this particular metric. So it's analyzing the strengths. What are your strengths? Basically, when you look at the strengths, you look at the characteristics of the business or the project that gives it an edge over or an advantage over others. So your strengths. And what are your weaknesses is important. A lot of times, even as a consultant, I've seen people who focus a lot on their strengths, which is not a bad thing. But then also it's important for you to know your weaknesses. Your weaknesses are going to be those areas, those growth areas. And if you're comfortable with just analyzing your strengths, it's easy for competition to come in and disrupt if you don't know what your weaknesses are. So as much as you're going to be analyzing your strengths, you should also know what your weaknesses are. So the weaknesses will be characteristics of the business that place the business or project at a disadvantage in relation to others. And then the next thing you're also going to analyze is what are the opportunities that exist in your environment that your project or your business or your organization or your NGO is structured to take advantage of. And then also the final one is now knowing the threats, elements in the environment that cause trouble for your business. So this is a simple analysis. As I said, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give a snippet of a lot of factors that could act on your organization. And part of this conversation, please, will be taken offline so that we can further buttress. So let's look at the challenges of an NGO. For us to be able to understand this better, we'll look at a case study. So I'll read through the case study. Usually for a workshop, virtual workshops are usually the most difficult to conduct because then you don't get instant feedback from the participants. But as much as possible, I want this to be interactive. So please drop your questions, and then in the Q&A session, hopefully we'll have time. I'll be able to go through some of those questions. But for us to be able to get some of the challenges, I'll just go through a simple case study, and it's just to give you an idea of what are the challenges that you could face. So let us start with a fictitious case, which would help us understand the challenges facing NGOs. So XYZ started an NGO organization called XYZ Foundation, concerned for giving assistance to many helpless people affected by a shortage of clean drinking water. XYZ raised money from her own family and started off her work in a small way in a nearby slum by constructing a borehole. Some other families heard about this good work, and they sent their donation. XYZ banked all this into her own personal account. Soon a bigger foundation heard about XYZ and made a small grant for her work. They required a project proposal, and this was no problem as one of her uncles was a water resource professor and he assisted with an excellent presentation. Funds came in and needed to be banked. It was not so easy now. The bank required a registered trust document and a board, etc. XYZ could not get into all of this and decided to continue without all of these restrictions. So basically, when the funds started coming in, the bank required a lot of documentation. And instead of her going through that process, she said, you know what, I'm just going to keep it in my personal account and continue running. So XYZ had no idea how to properly run. She had idea of how to properly run a foundation. She invited some of her friends to help. These friends were eager to help her, but lacked professional skills and ability to deal with issues when they were raised. But there was plenty of zeal and commitment. Regular visits were being made to the slums and more. So she's doing pretty fine at this point. Soon, one of the members of the community died. The family, the deceased family, had no idea of the actual cost of hopelessly situation. They put the blame on XYZ for the death. What followed was an inquiry into the XYZ Foundation. They asked for documents to prove it. I remember that she refused to go through a lot of documentary processes because of how tedious it was. and she just continued running it on a personal and a small scale. There was an inquiry into the use of funds. XYZ was about to get out of, XYZ was able to get out of this sticky situation after quite some time of struggle to convince the police that the cause of death was not from the boreholes, but the continuous drinking of water from the nearby contaminated river. Once again, her friends and family helped, but XYZ learned her lessons the hard way. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate with this kind of a story. So you start an organization on a small scale, there seems to be a lot of traction, you're making impact, and then all of a sudden, the situation arises. And that's why it's important for you to be able to understand the community, understand the legal angle, understand the external environment, understand your stakeholders before you even go into a business. It's not in the kind of clients we're in, it's not just enough for you to be passionate, it's also important for you to be guided. So as you can see, there are certain skills, for example, that you will require. So passion, as much as is enough for you to start, passion will not be enough to sustain you through the long run. You need other people to come on board. People are also as passionate as you are, but who are also skilled as you are. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this would require a lot of funding. It means you have to speak out. It means that you have to reach out. There are times when the service you're looking for might be available for free. There are legal services, there are NGOs, as I said, service-based NGOs that are willing to come to your aid when you require such. So as what this case study is trying to show us, there are different layers of challenges that you would face as an NGO, and we'll look at some of them shortly. So the lack of proper leadership. So as much as I said, you're passionate about it, do you have the leadership traits? Do you have the leadership qualities? Do you even know how to run an organization? And that's why trainings of this sort are very important. From yesterday, we've had a workshop, and a lot has been said. It's important that, as I said, you take conversations not just at the conference level, but beyond the conference levels, form partnerships, form collaborations that will help strengthen your leadership. And then also, the lack of financial resources are part of the challenges that a lot of NGOs are facing. Lack of proper processes. A lot of times, one of the issues I've seen with NGOs and organizations generally is processes are not documented. And if you don't document processes, it's hard for you to create repeated results. And one of the reasons the manufacturing industry has thrived is because a lot of things are process driven. And that is what we are trying to champion even in the NGO sector. Proper documentations of lessons learned, have a lessons learned register that you can be able to transfer from one project to the next. These are some of the concepts we are going to see as we go on. Limited capacity. We saw, for example, the case study we looked at, XYZ had limited capacity. There was no financial advisor on the team. There was no legal advisor on the team. As a result of that, there was not maybe even a technical advisor that will be able to tell you that the ball you're building is even the right side that you're building. All of this are skills that limited capacity can also be a challenge to NGOs. Poor maintenance of records and accounts. Record keeping, proper documentation is also just a challenge with a lot of NGOs. And then also in some cases, you have political interference where you want to do a particular intervention in an area, and because of politics, you're not allowed to do that. So these are some of the challenges that you can find. And then proper communication. One of the modules we're going to be looking at today is on proper communication. A lot of times people say, Shem, why are you trying to talk about communications? But what you find is, as much as the concept of communication has been taught over and over again, it seems that there's a lot of lapses as regards communications when it comes to running NGOs. And then also ethical issues, as I said, because something will pass in your jurisdiction does not necessarily mean it's going to be good for the next community that you're about to go into. So you have to be able to know what constitutes ethical issues where you are and in an area where you're about to start your organization. Just checking, okay. So let's go into a bit of strategic management for NGOs. As I said, we're getting snippets, and just for us to be able to touch on key points. Some of these conversations cannot be exhausted in 1 hour. But I'll try as much as possible to do justice to the subject matter. So when we're talking about strategic management, strategy in itself is a science and an art. It's basically you identifying and applying human and physical resources and carefully preparing for attaining the future goals you have set for your organization. And most of the times, a lot of people don't go into setting up and running an organization with strategic thinking, the strategic mindset. The strategic mindset is pretty much trying to see the end from the beginning, as much as that's not possible, but it's about also putting the right processes in place so that you ensure the proper running of your organization. And strategy, the concept of strategy will now lead to the concept of strategic management, which is about the management of organizations' resources to achieve its goals and its objectives. So strategic management involves setting objectives, analyzing them, analyzing the competitive environment, analyzing the internal organization. As I said, this also has to do with analyzing the external and then also the internal environment, and then also evaluating your strategies, ensuring. And most times, one of the mistakes I've seen organizations have is that their strategies are not evolving. So you find organizations that have been running for 10, 15, 20 years, and the strategy has been the same from inception. Strategy is supposed to be fluid. It's supposed to be flexible. It's supposed to be so that you're supposed to adapt your strategies to the realities of the current environment. And most times, what you're going to find is as the strategy evolves, it also affects the culture of the organization. There are times where there's an interplay between culture and strategy, but with the modern day adaptation of strategy, we've seen that strategy also has a lot of role to play in the way that the culture of the organization is. And then also ensuring that the management rolls out the strategies across the organization. It's not just enough for you to have a strategy session or to have a strategic tier. It's also important that that strategy is cascaded all the way down to the entire organization. And then strategy in the management world has to do with creating refers to basic directional decisions, basically coming up with the purpose and the mission for your organization. And this is very key. And also, purpose and mission can also evolve. It doesn't mean that it has to be static. It means that there are certain times where you might have even achieved some of your goals. You can evolve the purpose for which the business is set up. In some cases, it stays for a long time. In some other cases, we've seen organizations that had to rebrand themselves to come up and face modern day realities. Strategy consists of the important action necessary to realize those directions. So once the direction has been created, the next thing we want to do is also come up with actions that are required for you to be able to realize the direction that has been created. So strategy answers the question, what should the organization be doing? Strategy also answers the question, what are the ends we seek and how should we achieve them? So it's basically the why, the what, the when, and the how. And this is what strategic thinking is all about. And this mindset is very important as you run your organization, understanding the what, the when, the where, and the how. And this in itself it's supposed to be something that should be done with a team, rather than just carrying out the analysis alone. Most times it's important that you also involve stakeholders, understanding the mindset of those you're about to serve before going into any of it. So elements of strategic planning involves the vision and mission, the steps required to achieve this, and what are the resources available. So this is pretty much basic. And then this is I'm also a member of the Strategy Implementation Institute, and one of the framework, the roadmap that has been created for you to be able to effectively manage your strategy is to look at strategy in different tiers. So leadership, look at strategy from the leadership level, leadership excellence, financial value. How are you going to be able to provide financial value to the donors, to the beneficiaries, to people that are supporting your organization? And this also would now influence the way you set up your business model. So what kind of business model are you going to set up? Do you want to play, is it a small scale, as we said? Your business model is going to affect if you're going to be playing at a community level, at the city level or at the national level or even the international level. That would to a large extent involve or evolve the way your business model is going to be set up. And then also stakeholders management. This is very important, and this we actually have a module on stakeholders management. Hopefully we'll be able to get to that point where you really understand what the stakeholders involved. And stakeholders is very simple. The simple definition of stakeholders are those who are going to be impacted by the outcome of your project or your organization, and what are their interests. So how do you even analyze stakeholders' interests? There's a very simple analysis on how you're going to be able to do that. And then also, as I said, culture should be able to evolve. Don't have a culture that is static. And most times I tell organizations I consult for, culture is not what you put on the wall in your office or in your organization. Culture is what you do repeatedly. So you see an intern comes into your organization, and the first few days, they are observing. They're not reading what you have on the wall, even if they are. What they're going to be doing for the next couple of months of their engagement is what they see those that have been there doing every other day. And that's why culture should be, if the culture you want should be that you do, the processes that you have created in your business to be able to run the organization. As I said, culture can evolve. It is difficult, but it is possible. And then how do you engage your employees? And then also, most of the time, this is one area that is lacking: performance, tracking performance. Most times we don't actually like to track performance, but it is important for us to be able to, as regards strategy implementation, for performance to be tracked. Not just for the purpose of punishment, because I've seen organizations that track performance just to be able to mete out punishment. But then also there should also be a reward system in place to performances that have met or superseded expectations. And all this will be done with, you have to first of all craft the strategy, embed the strategy in the organization, execute the strategy, and also create a culture that sustains strategy. So let's go into the project management bit of this. This usually it's a module I would have taken maybe for 3 weeks. So as much as possible, please will be able to, as I said, I'm reachable online. The Better Life program is also very accessible to those who would want to reach out to get more information about some of the concepts that we're talking about. We'll be glad to be able to share the knowledge we have. And let's, as much as possible, try and touch base with some of these concepts. So when we're looking at project management, a lot of times some of the people related, we cannot relate to the fact that why are you talking about project management when it's NGO? But developmental and humanitarian organizations manage their work through projects. The offices are staffed by project officers who manage project teams. In turn, the project team write project proposal, develop project plans, implement project activities, monitor project progress, and evaluate project impact. And most of the times, your impact assessment is what your donors want to see. If I'm providing finance for your activities, I want to be able to see your impact, the impact that has been created with such initiatives. And why does project management matter? It creates accountability, it creates agents of change, and then it also helps you analyze the context in which the organization is working in. And there's a simple definition of what a project is. So a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create unique products, services, or results. Take note of the keyword. It doesn't have anything to do with the duration that it takes. So you can have a project that is 1 day, you can have a project that is 1 week, you can have a project that takes years. But the unique, it has to be unique. And what the uniqueness of a project is the fact that the outcome is not predictable. So you can sink a borehole in one area of the community and it was easy for you, and you go to the next one to sink the same design of a borehole and you run into a problem. So the fact that the predictability of the outcome of the project is not guaranteed makes it unique, and that's something you should be able to take note of. So it creates a unique product, services, and usually it is time bound. It has a start and a finish date. So as I said, it can be for 10 years, but there was a day it started and there should be a day is finishing. So the difference between a project and operations is the fact that operations is ongoing and the outcome of operations are predictable. So if you go into a production line for a car, we know that this is the amount of cars we want to be able to produce in a week, and we know the outcome of it. But if it's a project, you're not sure if you're going to be able to meet that target at the end of the week. You're going to put in strategies in place for you to be able to do it, but the outcome is not predictable as you have with operations. And usually projects are governed by the triple constraints of cost, scope, and time. So usually the scope of your project would affect the cost and the resources you use on your project, and the time it's going to take to complete your project. And then there are principles that guides project management. It should be well governed, so it means that you should have the right leadership in place. It should be participatory. As I said, the stakeholders that are involved should be part of the whole process. It should be comprehensive. Most of the times I've seen NGOs who have gone into communities, and the project is not comprehensive. They don't cater for the needs, the real needs of the people that they are meant to serve. And it should also be integrated. So integrated should mean that don't go into a community and do a project that cannot feed off the other outputs from other projects in the community. It is most times it becomes more rewarding when you come in and you do a project that the community can plug with existing infrastructure in those communities. But if you do a project that is operating as a silo, most times when you go back there after a few years, you discover that it is not being utilized because it wasn't integrated. And then being adaptive. For example, if you're going to do a warehouse in a community for storage, adaptive means that is that warehouse going to still be functional in a couple of years' time? Was there a growth plan? Was there an expansion plan incorporated into the design of the warehouse? So that's a system that is going to be adaptive. And being adaptive would also mean that it is not going to be obsolete in a short time. And usually projects would follow a particular sequence. So there will be initiation, so that when you come up with a project charter, the project charter is basically a document that approves or authorizes the use of resources on your project. And the next part is you're going to define your project and defining your planning. And planning, I've also seen most times where organizations plan in isolation. If you want to go into a community, the planning process is the point where you involve a lot of stakeholders in the work. So you ensure that you are even defining the project to the right needs of the people. And once that is clearly captured, the next thing you want to do is to go on and launch the project. As much as we're following a sequence in what performance and control is, control is one of the most important activity that you're going to carry out on your project, because control actually starts all the way from initiation. So control can easily be that you come into a community and say you want to sink a borehole. A member of the community says, we don't actually have a problem of water in this community. That's already a control metric. If you go ahead to do a borehole and it is not being utilized, it means that at initiation, you were not clear on what needed to be done. So as much as we are following a sequence, project control should start all the way from initiation, and it goes all the way down to when you close your project. So just to give you an idea of the complexity that you could have with a project. So the first diagram you see here is incorrect and inadequate understanding of the need of the customer or the needs of the beneficiary. And then this is poor design. So at the end of the day, what the customer or the beneficiary had in mind was just a simple rope and a tire, something very basic. But then you could see, because of lack of clear understanding of the needs, this is an unrealistic expectation. For example, when you have inadequate resources, these are things that at the beginning of the project, you should have been able to analyze. I've been on projects where it's when we're executing that we then understand the real needs of the customer or the beneficiary. And at that point, resources have already been spent. And sometimes you even go into a community and discover you don't even have enough resources to be able to meet their needs. But all of this has to be treated and be sorted at the planning table even before you start execution. So you don't waste resources that we know are very scarce. So this is just an interesting cartoon I saw online while preparing for this particular session. So I spoke about understanding the needs. So there's a Bradshaw categorization of needs that it's also, this can guide your process when you're trying to identify the needs of the community that you're operating in. So the felt needs focus on the thoughts and the dreams of the community itself. So also this you shouldn't take this in isolation. You can be able to mix them up. And then the express needs are done by observation of the community's action. So you send a team to survey how they do things. Is it that there's a lack of water? By just observing how they carry out their activities, you can be able to tell if this is what they need or not. So and that's why I said it is important that before you start a project, understand the needs of those that you're about to serve. And the next one is now the normative needs. Compare the current situation to a set of professional or expert standards. So you can look at the community you want to do your project in and compare with another community and see what is happening in the next community, and you can do that as a way of creating impact. And then the next one is to compare the current situation with the situation of the normative has to do with expert standards. What are the experts saying? And then the comparative has to do with comparing with the situation of others. But as I said, also you can mix all of this before you come up with the actual needs of the community. The felt needs also is very important. There are times when you go into a community, and just by their dreams and the aspiration of the community, you know and you have a direction of what to do for them. So I won't go through this because I already spoke a bit about it. So we'll just go to the next one. This is also very important for us to be able to the project log frame. Sometimes it's called the project logical frame. It also helps you. Create pretty much a tracking measure for your project. So your activities. First of all, you want to be able to group your tasks into the activity level. The activity level will then roll up into the output. Your output will roll up to your outcomes. And the final one will be the goal. So you come into a community and you say you want to do a goal. That's the goal of the project. What are the outcomes? The outcome is a finished borehole that provides clean drinking water. What are the outputs of the project? So you want to say for example, the output would be the numbers of boreholes that have been completed. What are the activities that will lead to those outputs? Maybe the land clearing, maybe even getting the site for the borehole, clearing the site, getting the workers that are going to work on the site. Those are activities that would lead to the output, and then the output will lead to the outcome, and the outcome will lead to the achieving of your overall goal. And then this will create you should have a project description, your indicators, what is actually going to be the success factors by which each of this particular metrics are going to be measured by. And then there should be a means of verification. How do you verify the information? And the final one is the assumptions and the risks. You shouldn't just go into carrying out a project at the back of your mind that things can go wrong. And if things go wrong, how are you going to be able to so this, I believe that every project should have a logical frame or a logical framework for its activities. Why is this important? Because most times the main problem, they don't go to the root cause. Before this project or in the office or organizations that try to deal with problems based on the consequences. When you deal with problems at the consequences level, the root cause of the and the root you can use what we call a fishbone diagram. A fishbone diagram is a diagram where you start with the head of you start with the main problem, and then you keep asking yourself why. You keep asking yourself why until you cannot ask yourself why anymore. most times just that simple process would help you get to the root cause. And also getting to the root cause also means involving stakeholders, the people that are the worst hit by the challenges in the communities. They will be able to open up to you. And as I said, also you can use the Bradshaw's analysis of needs, the felt needs, the expressed needs, the normative and the comparative needs. Those are ways that would help you get to the root cause. I know we are running a bit out of time, so I'll just touch on certain things with communications and stakeholders, and then I'll take some few questions, and then we'll round up the session. So in terms of communication, the greatest problem we're seeing with communication is the assumption that it has taken place. There are most times, and what this means is that there are times when you have a conversation and you don't solicit feedback. When you don't ask for feedback, you are assuming that there's clarity, and in most cases, as regards project, it is important that you get feedback. And there's a difference. So let's also just pretty much understand what communication is all about. So communication is basically sending and receiving information. I would run through this so we can get to the crux of this. And then also with communication, what you're trying to do as a project leader is create on the stakes clarity. So if you find yourself in a situation where different stakeholders groups are they're not having a clear understanding of what you're about to do, it means that your communication is not clear. And as much as possible with NGOs, this is very important, because you're going to find a time where you go into a community and you're saying a lot and it seems that the stakeholders don't understand. You have to come to the level. There are times when speak English doesn't work. You have to get a translator, or you have to convert the manual to the local language to be more effective. So that's why, as much as communication seems trying to come up with a communication plan, design communication directives, and then you're managing the flow of information. This is key as regards managing communications. Just for the record, for those who are registered for this particular session, you have access to the materials, and as I said, you can also reach out for us to have more conversations concerning the topics that we're going through. And so the question is, what is the difference between effective communication and efficient communication? So effective communication means the information is provided in the right format, at the right time, to the right audience with the right impact. A lot of times I've discovered that a lot of project communications is effective, but it's not efficient. Efficient means you're providing only the information that is needed. And why is this important? Most times I've read documents being said, and you have to sift through all of that huge document for you to be able to get the right information. For you to be efficient in your communication, as much as possible, provide only the information that is needed for such activities. I'm trying to see if we have any questions. I'll go through the questions at the end. We're almost out of time, so I would run through a bit of the slides. I'm sorry about that. Just so we can have some more insight into some other concepts I wanted to learn before we call it a day. So this is a template. I can make this available to you on how you can structure your communications management plan. So you identify the right stakeholders, their information needs, the method of communications, the frequency, and the sender. This is a simple template that you can use to manage your communications on your project. And then also when to communicate in noisy environment. So for example, when this session was going up, there was an alarm that came up to indicate that the light has come. As much as simple as that can be, it can actually be distracting. So those kind of things can actually affect the outcome of the message you're trying to pass across. The distance between those trying to communicate improper encoding of messages, negative statements. So this is also very important, especially when it comes to community-based interactions. So the way you approach the beneficiaries of your initiative can actually make or break your project. And culture also, understanding the culture, things as simple as dressing, the way you dress the community when you're about to address them can make or break it. The language, as I said, there are times where you're speaking a particular language and just the difference in language can actually affect the outcome of the communication. And finally, hostility. So we've short our time and we have not been able to exhaust all of the information I have. So I don't know if if we have maybe another 5 minutes for me to just run through the slides and we'll take some questions. So let's look at a bit of stakeholders management. This is also very important. It's a very important component that I would like to share before we wrap up. So do I have 5 more minutes to wrap this up?
Okay, yes you do. Yes, you do.
Thank you so much. So in trying to understand who are the stakeholders that you need to work with, as I said, stakeholders are those who have interest in the project or who are going to be the beneficiaries or the impact of the project will be affected. So stakeholders are people or organizations that are actively involved in the project whose interests may be positively or negatively affected by the project or as a result of the project execution or completion. So usually you can have negative stakeholders and you have positive stakeholders. So one of your responsibilities as a leader on the project is to how do you carry everybody along to ensure that your project is not affected based on maybe the negative stakeholders you have on your project. So you're going to have operations, donors, the general public, and this is just a simple mind map for you to be able to understand. For projects can get more complex. And advice, when you're about to undertake any project, it's important that you identify all the stakeholders. As tedious as that would be, it is important because the stakeholders that you don't identify at the start of the project can be identified later on in the project and can actually hamper the outcome of the project. So as I said, identify the people, analyze their interest, and then come up with an effective plan, develop an effective plan on how you manage their interest. So I went through this. I'm sorry about this. I'll just go right to some of the concepts that I really need us to learn. So this is a simple tool that you can use. It's called the Power Interest Grid, Power Influence Grid, and it's pretty much trying to draw up the interest and use this to classify stakeholders. So a stakeholder that has high influence and has high power on your project is a key player and should be managed closely. So once you've done the interactions with your team and you discover that a particular organization, a particular individual has high interest, has high power on that particular project, you know that that's a key stakeholder and that person should be managed closely. And I'll just go on the lower spectrum. If you find somebody or an organization that has low influence, low interest, the person, least important, minimal effort. But take note, this grid does not say ignore any stakeholder because we know situations can change. So a stakeholder you're ignoring today comes into a place of influence and power and has high interest on your project, it can actually affect your project outcome. So as much as possible, when you're doing your stakeholders classification, don't ignore any of the stakeholders. Come up with appropriate strategies for how you are going to manage each of your stakeholders. And as I said, stakeholders' influence is usually highest at the start of the project, and normally it's supposed to reduce as the project goes on. In few cases, we're always going to have outliers where some stakeholders' interest is at the end of the project that is highest. But normally, you have stakeholders' influence is highest at the start and is supposed to diminish. But the cost of a change, so if you, for example, if you have a stakeholder that wasn't carried along and it's towards the ending of the project that the stakeholder was discovered,
if the stakeholder makes any change to the project scope, what you're going to have is that the cost of that change is going to be highest towards the end of the project. So as much as possible, you want to be able to identify your stakeholders early enough, and then as much as possible, manage their interest all the way as the project goes on. So with this, I would show you the stakeholders register, and we would wrap it up. I'm sorry we're not able to touch a bit of the fundraising part, but with your permission, with the permission of management, I would make the slides available, and we can continue the conversation offline. So do we have questions I have to address? Okay, so do we have questions that I need to address so we can call it a day? Okay, and just as a gift for those who are registered for this session, we're going to get your emails and book available to those who are registered. So if you're not registered officially and you had access to the link, please register so we can have access to your information and make this gift available. So it's a book on running, on how to properly run a non-governmental organization. So with that, I will be ending this session. Thank you so much for your time, and please reach out if you have any question. Yes. So somebody just asked a question. Somebody asked, it's not which is better between effective and efficient. It's actually you merging both of them. So your communication should be effective and it should be efficient. So effective is using the right format, the right audience at the right time, and efficient means saying only what, or communicating only the information that needs to be communicated. So your communication should be both effective and efficient. Okay, if you want to know more about this Zoom talk, you can reach out. You can reach out to either of the organizations, the Better Life Program for the African Rural Woman, through our website, and also the Women Network Alliance, WenA, for more information about this. Okay, thank you so much. I'll hand over to the host now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shem Ayegba, for that brilliant presentation on managing an end. Thank you for your time, for your dedication, and for your attention. We applaud you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. With that, we have come to the end of this conference. We started it out yesterday,